So I managed to get myself into the Vermintide Versus closed alpha, where my dreams of playing as a Rattling Gunner could finally come true. So I thought I'd share my experience in this alpha and what I think of it for any of those who might be interested. So just to explain how it works, first of all, there's 4 players on each team and you'll start by choosing your characters. There'll be a random order deciding who gets to choose first. Once all players have chosen, one team will be called the Skulls, the other will be called the Hammers. When you're playing as the Übersreich 5 or 4, doesn't matter, you do get to choose your talents and which weapons you bring to the party, and then you advance through the level as you would in normal Vermintide. The level you play in the closed alpha is the Screaming Bell level. It's not the full level though that you'd play if you were just playing single player or co-op. It's edited so that it's shorter and a little bit different in places, like it puts some events in places that aren't there in co-op. Or it simply gives you a different route through the level so that you kind of cut through to later on in the level a bit sooner than you normally would, if that makes sense. But otherwise, you're still moving through the level as normal, dealing with mobs, Skaven slaves, clan rats, the occasional elite. They're kind of dumbed down, squishier versions though than in co-op. At least if you're used to playing on Cataclysm anyway. But of course, the big difference is all the specials that you're now going to be facing that are player controlled. And there's a lot of them because the respawn time is quite low. So the pressure from the specials stays quite constant throughout. But overall, it still just feels like you're playing regular old Vermintide when you're playing as the Übersreich 5. So of course, the fun comes in when you get to play as the Pack Sworn. You get a choice of 2 to spawn in as. I've got Packmaster and Rattling Gunner here. You choose the one you want, you load into the level. You'll be in this kind of ghost phase where you get to run around, find where you want to start to spawn from. It's all very Left 4 Dead, of course. And the idea here is that you've got to wait for the right opportunity to get in some damage on the heroes. They are very powerful in comparison to you. They will one-shot you with a lot of their ranged weapons. So if you just charge at them, it very often doesn't work too well. If you can set up something like this, getting behind them with a Rattling here, just hammering into them, you can see the damage numbers, all the ones coming off there. And you're kind of just chipping away at their health, slowly wearing them down over the course of their run. Again, much like Left 4 Dead. Of course, you do want to try and do big chunks of damage, but it's quite hard when a team all sticks together, which most teams do. So the Pack Sworn that you have, the Rattling Gunner, of course, as you've seen me using here a bit, this is the only long-range option. Pretty low damage, but good for constant damage. You can sit out the way like I am here, just kind of harassing, giving them a problem to worry about, but being so far away that it's kind of hard for them to get you. And then there's the Poison Wind Globadier. This is your area denial option, equivalent of the Spitter in Left 4 Dead. Good for slowing the heroes down, getting them stuck in places, cutting them off, or doing damage if they're pinned down by mobs. And then there's the Gutter Runner, your Left 4 Dead Hunter, of course. Wants to pounce on isolated survivors preferably, but as I say, it's pretty hard because everyone sticks together so well in this alpha at least. But he's the sneaky come-from-nowhere boy. And then there's the Warp Fire Throw, which is of course a flamethrower attack, so it's quite short, but pretty damn powerful. Good for cooking elves, like so. Also good for hitting more than one enemy at a time if you can position yourself well enough. And then lastly, the Packmaster with his grabby stick, but honestly I found this the hardest to use. You couldn't really do anything with it most of the time, unless you found an isolated hero, then you could drag them off somewhere, but other than that, it was really hard to make good use of a Packmaster. So that's all of the Pack Sworn options. Bosses do spawn in the level for the heroes to have to deal with as well, but sadly you don't get to control them. Storm Fiends, Rat Ogres, Chaos Spawn. The best you can do as a Pack Sworn is try to support the boss by trying to attack at the same time as the boss, so it takes a little attention away. The bosses are weakened versions of the normal version, so they go down pretty quick. But yeah, overall it's a battle of whose heroes can get further through the levels than the other guys. You'll take it in turns, both playing heroes, both playing Pack Sworn, trying to stop each other getting to the end of the levels, and you'll get a score as you go through the level. So here you see round 1, my team made it all the way to the end, all 4 heroes alive, we got 16 points. The enemy team, they nearly did exactly the same, except we killed their elf right before he got in the safe room, so they only got 15 points. And then in the second round, we again managed to get all the way to the safe room with everyone alive, and there was no way they'd be able to beat our score now, so we won without needing to play that second round of Pack Sworn. So again, it's all very Left 4 Dead. It's a point system. Whoever gets more points at the end of the rounds wins. It was only 2 rounds, which I think was a bit short. I think 3 would have been better, but maybe that was just for the alpha. It was a little bit shorter, but I guess they are just using 1 level as kind of a full campaign, shall we say. So I guess if they're going to do this with a lot of levels, it'll be fine. There'll be lots of different levels. It's just that games will be quite short. Overall, it is fairly good fun, although definitely in need of some tweaking and some balance. The biggest issue at the moment, I'd say, is that it is really hard to actually kill the heroes and get them down. You don't do a ton of damage as any of the Pack Sworn. so you can't really make any like big damage plays. And there's a lot of healing throughout the levels as well, so they constantly get their health back up, which kind of makes you feel like you haven't really done anything. Maybe you actually do get some good damage and you chip off a few enemies' health, and then they just all heal up and pick up a bunch more potions, and it feels kind of pointless. So some balancing to be done with either the amount of health for the heroes in the levels or the amount of damage that you do as the pack sworn. I personally would say do more damage as the pack sworn, because that kind of gives you a little bit more satisfaction when you do pull off a nice gutter runner grab or land some good shots as a ratling. Whereas at the moment, you're just kind of suicide charging in, doing what damage you can, and then because it's quite a short respawn time of like 15 seconds, you'll just come in as your next life as a pack sworn, and then again just try to do a bit of damage, die, and repeat the process. So you don't really feel like there's a ton of value to your life as a pack sworn, which is probably very Skaven appropriate, right? But when I think about what's satisfying about playing Left 4 Dead as Infected, it's when you make those big plays. You wait for the perfect opportunity, you try to set up a big play, and then you do a big ton of damage. It's very satisfying. You don't really have that in this. There isn't any real big damage dealer plays or no insta-kills that you can make. So I think there's some tweaking to be done to make the pack sworn feel a little bit more rewarding and satisfying when you actually damage the heroes. Although, as I say that in this clip, I do manage to actually packmaster somebody to the point where they are going to die and be gone from the run, which was indeed pretty satisfying. Another thing that maybe needs tweaking is the amount of mobs that the heroes have to deal with. Currently, it's pretty easy to just constantly move forward as the heroes and not really be slowed down by waves of clan rats and Skaven slaves, which again makes it quite easy for the heroes to get through the level and why they always seem to get to the end most of the time. So maybe if that was cranked up, the pack sworn would be a little more satisfying, and that you'd be able to actually use pack masters, you'd be able to get some more meaningful pounces with gutter runners. But perhaps a better way to do this would be to make some kind of boomer enemy for this game. No, not just some kind of old person, you know, in Left 4 Dead, the big fat guy that vomits all over everyone, and if he hits somebody, it'll spawn a horde. There needs to be something like that. Because in Left 4 Dead, that is actually the most important special infected, because it brings the hordes and it slows the survivors down. There's nothing in this that slows the survivors down or the heroes down. So with the absence of this boomer type character, then the game needs to be better at throwing these hordes at the heroes to actually slow them down and to support the pack sworn in their attacks. There's also the lack of a kind of charger character, which in Left 4 Dead is very disruptive. It's tougher and harder to kill than all the other special infected, so it draws attention, which again paves the way for other special infected to make plays. So there's a couple of big elements missing that make Left 4 Dead great that this hasn't done. And perhaps without those elements, it's going to feel a little lackluster on the infected or pack sworn side of things when you're playing as the rats. It's not going to be as satisfying. And I think that's going to be pretty important if they do want this to stay alive. So definitely some things to tweak around with for them to mess around with. But it's definitely a solid start to a versus type mode. It's nice to actually see a game trying to make a Left 4 Dead style versus. A lot of people just make the co-op side of a Left 4 Dead game, but they never try the versus side. So really nice to see Fat Shark giving this a good shot. It is a pretty damn good start, but definitely a few things they need to think about. We'll see how it goes though. Maybe we'll see it in Darktide one day, which might be a better fit for this kind of game mode. Alright, we'll leave it there. My voice is running out. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the future.